we are in this. I mean, this is a great time, right? Where you can the internet and the connectivity and the social media and all these different avenues has allowed us to really get a direct line of sight with the people that support like the work or are rather willing to from an artistic standpoint and a monetary standpoint. So what I mean by that is that back in the gap and music obviously went through kind of a bit of a soft revolution due to the same reason. And that was that the internet allowed, like with the streaming and all these sort of stuff, that sort of stuff, the industry's still trying to catch up with that. And they're trying to figure out what is like, how do you transfer that over to what we considered platinum albums or diamond albums back in the day? And they're still trying to figure that out because they don't know. It's added a completely different dynamic. And that dynamic, I think, is important to acknowledge and important to take into consideration because you're seeing that with other artistic or not autistic guys, artistic things. And the one thing that I want you to take in, like, if you don't listen to anything else as it pertains to this video, there's a lot of you guys that have aspirations and you're seeing that opening, right? We know that there's independent artists, independent creators, and definitely in the comic book space, which is the title topic. But you need to understand what you're competing with. So this is what will help you out in terms of if your aspirations are that. I know it differs from person to person, but I think we need not to forget what, like in the comic book space, what made the comic book space what it is. And it wasn't just the years of development. It was the concept in itself. When you think mainstream comic books, Marvel, DC, and I think if you're going to adopt this idea, well, okay, we want to topple these guys and we need to support independent creators, or rather creators that aren't them. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But what I will say is I don't think anybody, and you'll never become a legitimate competitor if you are treating that material as in, okay, well, just because it is an alternative, it is therefore going to be competitive and it needs to be supported. That's bullcrap. This is why when I talked about music and people ask me, well, backwards, hey, you guys saw some success there. Definitely the first album and you know, doing self-release and all that and being open with your, you know, with who it was you are, and despite the metalcore and the hardcore industry being almost exclusively leftist, you guys are able to succeed. And I always, you know, for you guys that talk to me, I always bring up the fact that we first worked on our craft. Okay, we first worked on our craft. That was the first thing that we did. So we all came from, you know, my previous band that I came from, Front, which is still going to this day. And then you had the band that, you know, the other bands that my bandmates came from. And, you know, guys like Alex, who had been in, you know, doing his thing with his band, but also like, you know, getting that training, basically growing up in the church and doing what he was doing as a musician. The guy's extremely talented. Alex is our bass player. You guys know him as our bass player and our vocalist, our second vocalist, the guy that does most of the clean vocal work. He can also play guitar and he can drum. You know what I mean? Like, that guy's incredible. He's unbelievable. So we got guys that knew what it was that they were doing. And also it was able to transfer into a product that people enjoyed. So you notice that we put out music videos with virtually every single that we had. It was professional. We looked for real because we're understanding what we're competing with. So it's not just being good at what it is that you do. So like a music aspiration, for example, you may be the best guitar player in the world, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't. You know, you record a track and you went to some old podink producer and your band's garbage or your band's work sounded like crap compared to everybody else. You may think you're the most talented person in the world. It doesn't matter. The product, when it manifests itself, It wasn't any good. It didn't even compete. It didn't sound professional. It didn't sound good. See, it's little stuff like that which I know though people don't want to hear it, but it's the reality of the situation. Okay? Like, don't think of it just in fact that, okay, I am an alternative, therefore you need to support me, or that's an alternative, we need to support that. What do you bring to the table that is competitive? So if we're talking about in the comic book space, what is Marvel and DC? I'm not talking about like making these extravagant movies. I'm talking about in a comic book sense, right? Well, you know, it looks good. You know, that's what people consider the beacon of comic books. It looks good. And maybe some of that's changed with some of these. They have been getting some weird kind of artists as of late. Like the Clear Road chick who draws chicks like dudes. Yeah, I know that those exist, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's like the best of the best. And that's what's expected to, that we expect from those brands. So if you're going to go in that space, then your shit needs to be not just as creative or in the concept or in your story, but the way you package it. And I think that's what a lot of people lose sight of when it comes to competing with mainstream. This can really apply to anything, is they think that, unfortunately, well, I'm in this space and I don't think like them and I'm an alternative. I'm not attached to them. Therefore, support me. And it's like, but are you good? Are you good at what it is that you do? Is it the way that you package it? Is it any good? If the answer is no, or you half-tailed it, you didn't really take that into consideration because you just thought, well, I could tell a good story, or you just thought I could play the hell out of this instrument, then you're not thinking in the terms of an actual competitor. Think of it in terms of like competition, like in like a food industry or something like that, or maybe not food, maybe more of a restaurant as opposed to food industry restaurant, because really the best food, some people would argue, and I would, it comes out of hole in the wall spots, right? But you get like more of the actual restaurant industry, right? And just look at it in terms of, okay, you want this place to feel like a homey feel, or whatever the feeling of the kind of genre that you're working with. And if it's presented well and the people that go there have a great experience, well, then you become competitive to the like other chains or what have you. But it's not until you do that to where you come competitive. Don't think that. Now, I see this all the time. It's like, look, there are people that are doing independent work that are they're doing it the right way. There's also some people doing it the wrong way. I cannot tell you the countless amount of people who have, let's say, they reach out and they're like, hey, I see you talking about Marvel, DC and the problems that they have. I'm an artist or I'm a writer and this is the comic book. And it's something like, look, I'm not trying to be some disrespectful, but I'm just giving it to you straight because I think we need this. It's like some dog shit. Like, how is that supposed to replace the artwork that you have seen like in a Marvel or DC comic, or not just the artwork, but like how it's packaged together? You look at it and you can't even take it serious. And again, I'm not saying that as a disrespect. That's legitimate criticism. Like, you're not going to compete with them putting that shit out there. I'm sorry. You're not. So don't think that just because you are an alternative, you're warranted with that support. That's not how it works. And this is why the first thing, even from people that ask me about advice on like being like having a successful channel on YouTube. If you see my videos on that, what have I said? I said, work on like making your stuff look the part first. You know, of course you have to have the personality and all that. Let's assume that you already got that. You can stand out just by packaging it in a way that is competitive. And a lot of people think that, well, I am an alternative. I do stuff and therefore you got to go support it. No, you're forgetting why people supported that other work in the first place. So for you guys that are looking to be competitive in the, compete with the mainstream, I am not one of those guys who's pessimistic about it. Do not get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not pessimistic, and I'm not saying that they can't be competed with. No, now more than ever, those big brands can absolutely be competed with. They can. They can be competing, despite what anybody says, despite what these Google normies say on the internet, despite what these weird cosplayers, no matter what it is that they say, they can be competed with. They can. But I do think it's an attitude adjustment for a lot of folks, and it's a real reality check. Because they don't seem to understand that, well, you still have to work, bro. So if we're talking about the comic book, how does your comic look? What is the story that's being told in that? Is it something that people can invest in? Is it something that people can invest in? Is it something that people can look at the Marvels and the DCs of the world and say, okay, I can put that on pause for this right here? We still haven't had that, guys. Like from people adopt. It's like you get people that are like, I want to tell this little cool one-off story and I'm done. And the artwork will be half-assed. And no, you're forgetting and you're losing sight of what made those two big companies what it was. It's not just simply that they had a hit movie or something like that, and therefore that boasted the sales. No, in fact, it's actually the opposite. They hit in the books, and then people wanted to do some adaptations for the most part. Sometimes you had some people like Guardians of the Galaxy or something become hits per se just because of a movie, and most people didn't really know them. But you get what I'm saying, generally speaking. So bring your, not even A, we're talking S-class. For my manga anime guys, I'm talking, you need to be trying to be the cream of the crop, in the words of Macho Man, and the rise. Don't look at yourself as a competitor and thinking that you're a competitor just because you're an alternative. No. Look at DC if you're in the comic book space. Look at Marvel. Look at what made them what it is that they are. And you have to try to answer rather the question of, is your work worth me dropping this over? And if it's not, doesn't mean you can't even have success. It doesn't mean that you can't do a great comic book or a decent comic book. It just means you're not going to be competing with those. And maybe that's not your aspirations. Mine's are different. My personal aspirations, when I'm entering in this space, I want to be a competitor. Am I going to topple them in my lifetime? I don't know. Maybe not, but I want to compete. And this is why it's always working. It's about working so hard on your craft and so hard on your brand, whereas just being talented isn't enough. It's not. You have to put it all together, professionalize it, make it easy. You got to understand, what are you competing with? You're competing with guys that can have a book, let's say as an example, at the store, walk down the street at the store, the local comic book shop, and get it every Wednesday. Right? That's a tall order to try to compete with. Can you? Yeah, possibly. Right? Having your shipping and stuff on point. Yeah. Maybe, but that's the type of stuff you're competing with, guys. So don't think that. And again, I know what I said earlier. I'm not trying to take shots at those people who reach out to me and think that, well, okay, I'm not Marvel DC, therefore you should support me. I'm giving you this criticism is constructive because I do want you to be great if you have some great ideas. But just simply being not Marvel and not DC isn't good enough. And you're not warranted support. And that just applies to me, obviously, too. You're not owed support simply because you aren't them. That's not how it works. Is it good? Is it packaged well? Is it presentable? Those questions are very, very important, and you have to answer that. If you are to compete with the mainstream, we're talking about comics, but actually that probably applies to virtually everything that we're talking about from an entertainment standpoint. Being not Marvel, being not DC is not good enough. That doesn't mean anything. You know, these weirdos that fell upwards and somehow get control of books and characters that have existed for decades for Marvel and DC. Have you seen their work when they do try to like make a work themselves? Right? You wouldn't go generally support that just because it wasn't Marvel DC. No, usually that stuff is garbage. It's hot garbage. Like hot garbage. But, you know, it's kind of this fell upwards political stuff. And this is why, and I'm ending this note, this is why I think that Marvel and DC are opening the door for you guys. They're opening the door. Like they are shooting. They got cocky. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Their work isn't as up to par as it should be despite having all of their money. So people are actively looking for alternatives. You just have to package it in a way that's convincing for that person to say, okay, I had a good run with this stuff, but now I'm about to be emotionally and financially and mentally invested in that now. And that's hard, man. That's a very difficult thing because the one that's the first in and the best dressed, they're always going to have the advantage. That doesn't mean they can't be competed with. That means you have to package your material in a way. So I'm saying this to inspire you. Don't try to get so ahead of yourself to where you're like, okay, I have ideas. I'm an artist. I'm going to just do something, put it out. No. If you're trying to become a legit competitor, then you need to take a step back and say, all right, well, how do I get this? And go scout your competition, right? Go see what they're doing now, but also see during the periods that we generally see them as being great. What was it about that? Research. And then you package it in a way that's presentable and competitive. Not just, okay, look at me. I'm not Marvel, not DC. Here's my dog shit work. That's not good enough, obviously. But I want folks to take advantage of it because there's one or two things are going to happen here. I've discussed on other people's channel as well. One or two things. Either if there's enough competitors that rise to the point to where, okay, people are really financially and invested into these books or whatever it is that you're doing, they're either going to get ran into the ground or they're going to have to pivot. And they'll be like, okay, that maybe this dog crap that we were doing for the last decade and some change ain't the route to go, particularly with this social justice bull crap. We probably need to change it up, right? One or two things are going to happen. Don't make me know never mind, but whatever. Please, guys, take that into consideration if you are trying to be a competitor in this market. DC and Marvel is giving you an opportunity, but don't think that you are owed success and do not think that you are owed support from people that are looking for alternatives just because you are an alternative, because that's not good enough. You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.